county courthouse. And for some reason, he is very, very upset.
What's wrong, old timer? Let me get you a seat. We'll work our way over here.
We're just like beer. We're just like beer.
They don't have time to make it too late.
What's your name? You been around here long?
My name's John. Jeremiah John. I just applied for a war pension. You see, I fought the British in the War 1812. We fought to keep our country free, but now here it is August 1871, and they decided to give us a pension. Shouldn't cost the government very much. Ain't many of us left. I'm 94 years old. About everyone I know who fought in the war has already died. They asked me a lot of questions, and when I couldn't remember all those dates they wanted me to know, they said I was old and my memory was impaired. I told them, son, when you live as long as I have, you have to try to remember the important things. I can still remember when I was just a lad, we lived in the rugged wilderness of southern Virginia. I had to do a man's work even though I was still just a boy. There was no country for the weak. Only the strong could survive. I've chopped wood since I could lift an axe. I learned how to live when food was scarce. I knew what roots I could eat, what edible plants I could gather, so we wouldn't go hungry when drought or insects took our garden. You ever prepared a field for a garden? 'Tain't easy, I tell you, not in the hill country. You have to cut the trees down that are in the field, then grub out the roots. Grubbing roots sure ain't no fun. Trees have to be cut from the garden, enough so the sun to shine through. Plants in the garden need sunshine. Then you go to plow and you hit rocks. I don't know where they all come from, but I plowed the same fields for 40 years and I still find rocks. I learned to shoot straight at an early age. Cost too much to miss. When somebody heard a shot, they expect to see food for the pot. Wouldn't like these city slickers now that'll just hunt for fun. We hunted to live. Back when you had to go be on the lookout for marauding Indians, you had to keep a gun close by at all times. Before I was old enough to shoot, I learned to load guns at home for the others to shoot during an attack. It was about 1795 when I found this place I wanted for my own. It lay near Big Spring Branch in the East River Valley. Looking down from the East River Mountain, it was as beautiful setting as I've ever seen. It even had a cave I could use for a cellar. I was 18 years old, strong as a bull, and I went to work to build a house. I built it out of white oak that I cut from the mountains. I squared the logs, notched them, and set them in place. It was a 5-room log cabin, and I later added a log summer kitchen next to the house. With my own 2 hands, I hollowed out logs and made a pipeline to run water from the spring up in the hills down to the house. I only had 1 window, which made it easier to defend against engine attacks. Now that I had something to offer, I went back to Franklin County, Virginia, and married the woman that I loved, Susanna Agee. She was a woman to build a future with. She was a strong woman that could endure the heartaches and the hardships of a pioneer living in a wilderness away from civilization. We want to help open up this part of the country for the others who would follow after us. And the heartaches, they were aplenty. Do you know what it's like to have a sick child and not be able to help him? You watch it die, and part of you dies with him. And the poor Bailey family who just lived a few miles away, the Indians come when the man was away hunting and they killed most of his family. They took the older children with them, but those too young that were too slow, they just grabbed them by their feet and smashed their heads against a tree. No, a woman had to be strong, or just being isolated from other people would make them go crazy. It's happened to a lot of them. But my sweet Susanna came from good stock. The Agees were French, but I didn't hold that against them. They had more book learning than most families down in Franklin County, but they proved to be hard workers, and I respect anyone who works hard for what they want. Suzanne and I raised 10 kids to maturity, besides the ones that died young. But families started moving to our area after the Indians were forced further west to sign treaties. Oh, we'd have occasional uprisings, but not bad as before. There was too many whites for the Indians to fight now and when. Most of our children married local people and didn't wander too far away. Now, the man that brought me today was Louis Blankenship, and he'd married my daughter Polly, and he's been like a son to me. The Blankenships, like us, were here early. They were raised at Ingleside, just a few miles down the branch. Louis's father, Richard, fought in the American Revolution. Our last child to leave home was our youngest daughter, Helen. Dear Helen, she became in a family way before she was married, but she had a fine young son named James Hiley. Since she wasn't married, he went by the last name Jones. We upraised this lad since Helen was living with us, and he seemed more like a son than a grandson. James was 15 when his mother married John Boland. My dear Susanna passed away while James was here, and he would sometimes stay with my son, Israel, who lived nearby and ran a grist mill. Now, Israel was married to Martha Blankenship, who was a sister to Louis, who's here with me. Well, it just so happened that Martha had a niece who was also named Martha, that Israel and her were having to raise. And when you know it, James fell in love with that niece, and after the Civil War, he went and married her. That was in 1867, 4 years ago. They moved to Meigs County, Ohio, and I surely do miss them. Yes, I'm old now. I don't have much time left. My old body's wearing down. But I've lived a full life. I've watched the world change around me. I don't always like what I see, but I believe I've left my footprints on this earth. And a part of me will live on through my bloodline. You youngsters may laugh at this feeble old body, but I doubt many of you could have survived what me and Susanna went through. People get too soft nowadays, want to live in towns, have a fancy carriage. Well, I guess it's better for me to go on. I know Susanna's waiting on the other side, and the nerve of that man called me memory impaired.